Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 2 of Thinking and Believing. And today we are going to focus on thinking and believing, and here's why. We learned last week that we have two states of being. If we see people as people, we have a connected state of being, but if we see them as object, we become disconnected and have a disconnected state of being. And we introduced the self-coaching model. And the reason this self-coaching model is so valuable, I believe, is because it really helps us understand the difference between our circumstances, which are the things that are happening to us that we can't control. It's what other people are saying and doing and the events in our lives, and the difference between our thoughts, which are the sentences in our mind telling us what the circumstances mean. And what's important to know about that is that our feelings are generated by our thoughts. For example, we talked about this example that if we lost our job, we can be thinking about it as we can't pay our bills and we would be feeling hopeless. But if we're thinking about it as this is a good chance to find another experience, then we would be more excited and encouraged. And so our feelings feel like they are about our circumstance, but they are actually about what we're thinking and believing. Same idea. Another example, when we talked about our husband, if he came home from late 3 times in 1 week, we could be thinking that work is more important than we are, and we would be feeling rejected or mistreated. But if we're thinking that work is hard and traffic is bad, we would be feeling more compassionate and grateful. And so our feelings tell us, we think they're telling us that our problem is the circumstance, but our problem is actually what we're thinking. And when we plug this into our state of being and seeing people as people, we can see that our circumstance is the other people. And our thoughts, what we're thinking about that, is how we're seeing them, whether we're seeing them as people or objects. And our feelings, of course, are the feelings that are generated by the way we're seeing people. And so the feelings feel like they're because of the other person, but they are not. They're actually because of the way we're seeing them. And so the value to this in our coaching and managing our heart is that when we feel blame and mistreated and victimized and all of those disconnected feelings, that even if we're blind to where the problem is, and if we're convinced it's the other person, we can know that the problem is actually because of how we're seeing the other person. So when we're feeling blaming emotions, we know that somehow we're seeing something untruthfully, that we're seeing something as an object, whether it's another person or a lot of times we're seeing ourselves as the object. So when we talked about last week that thoughts are not necessarily what's generating our feelings, but rather when we believe those thoughts, because we have thoughts coming to us all the time, and we have connected thoughts that are coming to our minds and disconnected thoughts all the time. And the choice is whether we believe or don't believe either one of them. Any of the thoughts we don't believe, they actually just have no influence. See my little poofy sign? They have no influence. If we aren't believing them, they don't generate the feelings involved. If we have connected feelings, if we have connected thoughts and believe our connected thoughts, we're going to have connected feelings. When we believe our disconnected thoughts, we're going to have our disconnected feelings. We can go on and realize that when we have connected feelings, no matter what action we do, we'll communicate that connection. We're going to communicate care. And when we communicate that care, we will invite connection. And when we feel disconnected feelings, no matter what behavior we think we have to have to fix the problem, if we're feeling disconnected feelings, we're going to communicate blame. And when we communicate blame, we're going to invite defensiveness. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to actually get really into how our state of being and how we're seeing people colludes with other people seeing us as objects, and how we can just get into quite a spiral. And that's an exciting topic for me. But today, what we're going to focus on is the thinking and believing. And so here's my question to you. Do you remember believing the disconnected thought that causes your feelings? When did we choose to believe a disconnected thought? Seems like that's a pretty serious question because of what it generates from there. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to close your eyes, and we're going to do a little exercise, and I want you to sit quietly, and all I'm asking you to do is just to stay present in the here and the now, and to concentrate just on your breathing. In, out, in, out. If you find yourself thinking about what you're going to make for dinner or an argument you had last night, I want you to catch yourself, and let's try again, and I want you to just think only of the present, here and now. In, out. Now my guess is before you know it, you're going to be actually thinking of a conversation you had, or of something you need to do, or you might be planning your next vacation. It's very difficult to keep our thoughts from thinking. And our thoughts generally tend to be not in the present. In fact, they are always not in the present moment. And I want you to, you can open up your eyes now, but I want you to consider, where were you feeling those thoughts? If you had to pinpoint a location in your body, where are those images and thinking? Where is that? For me, and for most people I talk to, I feel it in my forehead, and I find that those are my thoughts, and that they are usually very busy. They usually don't stay still, and they're usually images of the past or predictions of the future. Now, I want you to consider, when you're sitting still and quiet, and when you're present with the present, where does it feel? Or let me ask you another question. When I ask you to say the words "I am," and by that I mean, like, if I'm saying, who is the mother of your child, or who will be the mother of your child, and you say "I am," where do you place your hand? If you're going to place your hand on your body, where on your body, what location do you place your hand? For me, my "I am" is centered. It's right centered. Now, the reason that's important to me is because we have inside us thinking, and we have voices, and we have our voice. And I consider it the light of Christ given to every man. I consider that my true nature, my wisdom, my voice of wisdom. And then my thinking, I consider they're still voices. They're voices going on in my head. And if I can be clear to myself about the location of my voice and my voices, it really helps me find connection. And when I'm not watching the thoughts going on in my head, it's as dangerous to let my thoughts guide what I believe as it is to let a child run through the house with a knife. Anyway, another point I want to make about believing is just the vocabulary word itself, the definition of believing. When we talk about our beliefs, we're talking about something different than when I'm saying, what are you thinking and believing? For the sake of this class, when I'm talking about our core beliefs or believing truths that I know from my center, I'm going to call that know. Those are the things I know. But when I refer to the word believing, I'm going to be talking about when we're buying into the thoughts that are going on our heads. When we're believing our thoughts, that's what I mean by believing. So, and what we're going to do today when we talk about thinking and believing is we're going to learn again and keep practicing the turnaround process. Because if the problem is in our thinking, it's our thoughts that we want to turn around. And so here, this is kind of a review of last week. What we want to do is we're going to catch the warning signs, download our thoughts, turn them around, and then eventually, we'll talk about this next week, we want to actually rewire them so that they don't keep going the way they're used to going. Our thoughts won't. How do you catch your thoughts? How do you catch that you are disconnected? If we're blind to it, it's really hard to find error in our thinking when we're so sure of our thinking. But it's pretty easy to catch our blaming emotions. They're very loud, and they tend to be they tend to really catch our attention. We also can catch that we're doing other things that are consistent with making a list. For one, if we're actually making a list, you know you're building your case. If you're bringing a lot of images of the past, a lot of past experiences to prove your case about how it always did this way and you did it this way and you did it this way, or if you're predicting how it's always going to happen in the future, that's a big sign. If you're looking for people's faults and you're almost happy when you find that they've mistreated you again, that's a good sign. If you feel like you're the victim in this and you look at yourself and you're actually magnifying your own virtues, that's a sign. If you're insisting on being right, and right is so important, you've actually distorted the value itself. You can be pretty sure that you have some inquiry to do. So here is how I like to question our thoughts. This is the model, and it looks really full. It looks really busy on this page. This is not actually as complicated as I'm making it look, but I want to make sure that we learn the process pretty completely, and then as we get really good at it, the process flows really quickly and smoothly, and it isn't really important that every single little thing happens every time. We'll kind of adapt the process to what we're thinking and believing in the situation in that time. But here's how I like to look at it. If we just get a piece of paper and write CTFAR on the edge and CTFAR straight down the middle, so you have two columns, then the first thing we do is look right here on number 1 and we identify the feeling. Then number 2 is when we're going to do the download, which is going to take a whole sheet of paper. Whether you are just doing an open download where you just write down everything going on in your thoughts and just write it all down and do not censor it. You want to just write down what really you're thinking, and don't be afraid of using nice words, because these are the thoughts we are going to get rid of, remember. So just download it, because getting it out is the best way to get it out. And then what we want to do is from there condense all those into a one-liner, because we can really just work on one thought at a time. And it's nice if you can make sure your one-liner doesn't have a bunch of because this and because this and in this. We just want basically a very simple one-liner to be able to question. And then write down number 3, you can see, is your circumstance. Write down what the actual fact is, the part that can be proven. Write down your circumstance, and I wrote the question, what part of this can I not control? But that's what we're talking about, is that's the circumstance that you're not going to change. And then in number 4, you're going to ask this question: how do I react when I'm thinking and feeling this thought? How do I react when I think this thought? And I want you to get into your simulator and go into the moment when you were really, really thinking that thought and ask yourself, how you're reacting, how you're treating other people, what you might be communicating. Then there's number 5. Ask yourself what kind of responses you're inviting. That's always amusing. Then I want you to, number 6 is we're going to look at the circumstance, because the circumstance on our left side of the paper, that is our connected side. There is, that is the part that isn't going to change, the circumstance. So just copy what you wrote on the circumstance on number 3 and put it on number 6. And then you're going to look at number 7, which is your feeling line, and ask yourself, how do I want to feel about that? I cannot change whatever you wrote on number 6. I cannot change my circumstance line. How do I want to feel about this? And then visualize your best self. Now, at this point, I either do, a lot of times I will do both, but sometimes I will just do, I will just look at these, if you'll look on the side, these connected emotions, these connected feelings, and I have, this is kind of my go-to list, and you may find your own go-to list, but these are words that actually, words and actually ideas that invite me to look at my situation, my circumstance, in a connected way. And so before you do this, take a deep breath and get very still. Because if you remember what we talked about, the thinking is very busy and the heart center is very still. And we want to find our best self and visualize, here's the circumstance I can't change. How does my best self want to feel about that? And then I will answer each one of these. Sometimes, if I'm in really deep, or depending on what the thought is that I'm questioning, it's much more effective for me to then go into the turnaround questions. Looks like I actually have an example. I'm going to do the example next. But then let me just finish going all the way through this. Then I will do the turnaround questions, where I'm actually asking myself questions that are the opposite. And you can look at your turnaround examples that I've given to you, and take every question and turn it around. And remember, what we're trying to accomplish is to get our brain, to force the brain that is looking and looking for examples that are proving the thought that's disconnected, and to force it to look at the opposite and to find examples of the opposite. And it will help us see things clearly. It's a very fun process. I really like it. And then if you find yourself successful, and then what you want to do is say, number 9, with my new perspective, what do I sense is the right thing to do for the other? And recognize that in that spirit of change, in seeing people as people, you will have a much better perspective for deciding what action you need to do, and realize that that action, even if you aren't quite sure what to do, if your heart feels connected, you will communicate connection. Now keep in mind that you are only ever the other person's C line, and so if they're thinking, believing other things, they're not going to see you, their circumstance, necessarily the way you're inviting them to see them. Keep that in mind. That helps us not be defensive. It also helps us not jump back into the box. But and then the results, which I just said, is I will never be more than the other person's C line. So we aren't going to expect that just because we have changed the way we're seeing things, that other people are going to see what you're feeling. All right, and because examples are most effective, I'm going to go through an example that has been recent, because I feel like recent examples are the most effective for me. So I will read, actually, I'm going to pause. Okay, so I want to share a personal example to just walk through this with you. And this last week, they asked me to teach music in the church, in my church. And after it was over, I found myself really kind of spinning in my thoughts and feeling all kinds of emotions. And I thought, well, I'm going to download my thoughts. So first I caught the feelings that I was feeling embarrassed and incompetent, and I sat down to just download my thoughts. So in my case, I just decided to use a notebook, and it took a couple or 3 pages, and just download everything I was thinking. I could have filled out, I could have just used some guided ones, but especially with a lot of what I'm doing I was actually turning myself into an object, which we'll talk more about, self-doubt. But I haven't come up with really good guided questions for self-doubt. So I just wrote. And like I said, don't censor. And so here's mine, just how it is. The primary leaders are unhappy with how I did the music. The kids were noisy. I forgot to get the cake for the birthday song. And so it was so chaotic. Time got away from me. I shouldn't have offered a free snow cone. That was inappropriate. It didn't work out. I wish I hadn't done it. That's so embarrassing. They are thinking I'm out of control. They don't like the job I'm doing. When I forgot to have the kids stand up, I think the lady in charge that was conducting was irritated with it. And that's okay. I'm not good at staying put together. I don't have that calming effect that the primary leaders wanted when they were choosing a chorister. I think they're sorry they asked me. Some of them probably don't even like me. I bet you they changed their mind. I shouldn't have offered the snow cone. I tried to do too much in that time. I should watch the time better. So those were the things that I kind of downloaded that I was just, and as I look at them, I realize no wonder I felt embarrassed and incompetent, because I'm thinking all of these thoughts. So then what we want to do, like I said for number 2, is I want to get down to one line. And as I looked through all of the things I wrote, I kind of wrote, I could come up with a few one-liners, which it doesn't hurt to come up with a few. I wrote, my whole aura was chaos. I wrote, the primary leaders are sorry they asked me. I wrote, I'm out of control. And I wrote, the primary leaders don't like me. And I thought, as I looked at those, the one that said the primary leaders don't like me, I actually didn't have, I really don't believe that. I didn't, that was something that I was easy to not believe, because I have pretty solid relationships, quite close to the primary leaders. And so that was one I didn't really want to work on. There really was no belief there. And so I finally chose, the primary leaders are sorry they asked me. And so then I decided, what is the actual circumstance, the facts that I could prove? And it was that I didn't have the children stand up. I forgot to have the children stand up. I went overtime, and they were noisy. And then I go to number 4, which is then I want to go to the action and say, and ask myself, how do I react when I think that thought, that they are sorry they asked me? Well, I avoid the primary leaders. I kind of went out without taking the time to actually go talk to them. And I put off preparing. Every time I thought about preparing for primary, it was a burden that I didn't want to have to get around to doing. And it just wasn't, I didn't enjoy it anymore, which actually, if you look at it, was actually going to invite the very thing I'm afraid of, which is I'm going to be a poor music chorister. And I'm actually going to weaken the relationships that I have with the primary leaders, and they probably will eventually be sorry they asked me. So now I'm going to take a deep breath, because I'm going to move to the other side. And I'm going to copy, like we said, we're going to copy number 6 is going to copy the circumstance, because I can't change that. It is what it is. It happened. And so I copy that over, and then I ask myself, how do I want to feel about that I didn't remember to stand up and that I went overtime? And like I said, there's 2 ways to do this in my mind. We can actually just look at at connected emotions, and and think about how we can feel those emotions, or we can actually go ahead and do the turnaround questions. I'm going to kind of show you how I would do both of those. As I look at, first of all, being calm and centered, just reminds me that when I'm connected, I'm calm and centered. And I take a deep breath, and it helps me to not be listening to all this noise for a little while. And we're going to actually just try to, and as this noise slows down, it kind of comes to, and it settles in my true nature, into that voice of wisdom. I want to feel confident. And when I'm confident, I want to remember my divine value, and that I have awesome gifts to share. And I want to remember other people's value, and that they have, I want to be confident in them. And I want to have, more than anything else, confident in God's program, that all of these experiences, He has a plan for all of this. And that confidence connects me. I want to be compassionate. And when I'm compassionate, I want to be very aware of the other person's experiences. And I want to remember that we have in common. I also want to be compassionate of myself, and remember that I do have that. I have my humanity in common with other people. That compassion connects us. And I want to be honest without any need to defend. I want to be willing to see my own mistreatment. And I want to be concrete. And that's the word for, I want to have the courage to see things truthfully. So a lot of times when we're trying to be connected, we tend to just say, everything's okay. Just be walked all over, be a doormat. And I want to be concrete in what I know is right. And sometimes love requires harder actions. And so when I'm concrete in my feelings, if I am going to need harder action, I want to be connected. And grateful is my favorite one, because I heard somewhere that you can't be grateful and something else at the same time. But I believe that you cannot be grateful and disconnected at the same time. So forcing myself to look at what I appreciate about the other person, what I appreciate about myself, what I appreciate about the experience, just helps me feel and see connectedly. And so this is what I did. As I thought these questions, I thought, I want to be honest. I want to be willing to see where I can do a better job and learn. How else do I want to feel? I want to be confident in my judgment, and I want to be confident in my ability to get better. And I want to be connected to the leaders. I want to be aware of their experience. I want to be grateful for them. And I want to remember how grateful I am to do this. And this one was particularly easy because I was really grateful for the opportunity to be the chorister. I was very grateful. So it was easy to start finding thoughts, and it's really helpful to write these thoughts down, because we're going to lose them. We might lose them, So write down. So here were some thoughts that were causing these feelings. The snow cone wasn't a good idea, but you know what? It didn't hurt anything. I thought, I want to make sure I gather ahead. And that actually helped me feel more confident. And as I think about my own judgment and my own experience, I started remembering I actually am pretty confident in my ability to teach. I've had a lot of experience teaching children, and sometimes I feel like I have had some really successful experiences. And in fact, I'm old enough that I have had probably more experiences in teaching than the primary leaders that I'm worrying about. I'm pretty experienced. And as I begin to try to be looking at the feelings of being connected to the leaders, and I began to look at what they were experiencing, I realized that they actually were concerned themselves for their job. They were in their business about them being on their first day of primary. And I began to, in the gratitude, think, oh, I appreciate this woman because of this. I appreciate that woman because of this. And I began to see them as people of wonderful value, like me, in worrying about how we're doing things, and uniquely valuable, uniquely different. And I began to list the ways I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be able to teach music. I'm grateful to be able to teach in the church right now because I hadn't for several years. I'm grateful for I'm grateful for the other women. And then in that state of mind, I can then go on to the actions. How can I do? And that's how I'm going back one screen. That's how I begin to process things that I can do to that love requires with this creative ability, and not so much in the spinning with my brain so busy on uncreative things. Now, here is how I would do the turnaround questions. I actually, in doing the turnaround questions, I found that the phrase that I had started with, which is, they're sorry they asked me, it just wasn't turning around very effectively. And so I kind of rephrased it to turn it around to, the leaders aren't happy with the job I'm doing. And so what we want to do is do the opposite. First to the opposite, which is, the leaders are happy with the job I'm doing. So I forced myself to begin to find some examples of why the leaders, why it's just as true or truer that the leaders are happy with the job I'm doing. And I thought about the gal who was conducting actually said, I sure loved the music I was hearing when I walked into primary. And she also said, there was a hush in the room when I came in. And which isn't that funny, because in the description that I wrote, I didn't remember that at all. I had forgotten that she had even said that. Then we can go when I do to the other, if it's like this where there's not two people kind of, then we're going to say the leaders aren't unhappy with the job I'm doing. And sometimes that question, it sounds like the very same question, but actually we find that question can bring some thoughts that the other one didn't. And in this case, when I'm thinking the leaders aren't unhappy with the job I'm doing, and I actually look, I go in my simulator and I look at them sitting in their seats, and I'm thinking, that's when I realize they actually aren't worrying about me at all. They're very intent on actually what they're doing and about the primary and about their first day of primary. And then I turn it to myself. I'm not happy with the job I'm doing. Now, in this case, that's where I'm already thinking and believing it's not a really good opposite. And so remember, there's no rules in turnaround questions. All we're trying to do is get our brain to go in reverse, basically. We're trying to get our brain to look for examples that are not what we're seeing readily. And so I actually turned it to, I am happy with the job I'm doing. And that forced me to actually think, what did I like about the job I did? And it reminded me, I remembered, you know what, I actually was pretty happy about when we were playing a name game and we were singing the song. I was really happy with how interested the children were, and that when I called on one of the older children, and I was actually happy that she was learning them but didn't know them all, that it wasn't something they already knew. I was really happy about that. And I thought about the opening song that we sang, and I thought, I really liked the spirit that I felt when we were singing that opening song. And as I forced myself to answer these examples, I find that my mind is opening up and I'm realizing that I wasn't singing the true picture, that I was in fact seeing through a distorted set of lenses. And then I can ask, the leaders might be unhappy with the job I'm doing, but I am all right. And as I think about examples of that, I think, do you know what, whether or not the leaders are happy with what I'm doing, that isn't even my business. And I actually lose some of my I am just by going there. But for me to realize that I'm all right. I'm excited for next week. I'm excited for my this chance I have. I'm all right. And then the leaders might be unhappy with the job I'm doing, and they are all right. And that is a good opportunity for me to recognize that even if there's people in my life who are seeing me untruthfully, they are still valuable, awesome human beings. And as I name the ways in which they are unique and valuable, it brings me into a connected state. So you can kind of see how these turnaround questions do very similar to what we can do with just looking at connected emotions and finding thinking that would help that. Either way, what we're trying to do is just clear up our vision and get rid of that tunnel vision of building our caves. And once we're liberated, we can see very clearly that through connected lenses, and we feel, and when we get here, this is actually something we're going to talk about next week, but when we get here, feel that connected emotion, or take some time to keep feeling those connected emotions. Don't let them, because we need to rewire those connections. Next week, we'll talk more about that. So that's, then once we're connected, then once we're connected, then we can answer the question, what action am I doing? That's number 9. And we can ask ourselves, what result am I inviting? And so that's the example of how I did that. And now it's your turn. This week, I want you to please try to practice again, do another example, and I'm excited to talk with you about it next week.